Hey everybody, welcome to a new video or a different style video. This will be a mixture between a review, commentary, mixed with just comparing and going over just details between both games and showing how both Arkham Asylum and Spider-Man PS4 are mirrors of how to introduce your audience to basically your world and how to basically make a superhero game and do it well. Now, I will be going over a lot of things as a um, player of both games, and I also will go into heavy details, spoilers, and break down Easter eggs and try to be as detailed as I can. Um, I am not going to be comparing the games because they are one came out in 2009 which is pretty heavily dated graphically, and I will be using footage from the remastered version because I can't get it from my 360. um, and the other, I will try to use a mixture of gameplay and screenshots the best I can. And I will be going into a lot of detail about the characters and the writing and just gameplay and everything in general. So if you guys enjoy this video and want to see the others that I have in mind in the future, please make sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, all that jazz really helps me out. So yeah, and stay tuned towards the end. So let's get this video on the way. Part 1, Batman. Batman is a character that we know a lot about. He's a very complex, complicated. He's been done so many times in the movies. So at the time of when this game was released, around 2009, Rocksteady had a lot under their belt to make this game what it is, in a way, creatively. This was around the time when there was a lot of movie tie-in games, and there's been that way for both characters. Basically, Rocksteady were fans of Batman. They loved the comics, they loved the movies, they loved the character. But they wanted to make a character that basically is pretty much its own standalone thing. Basically, it's its own universe, and it's their universe, their Batman. And so they recruited a lot of the voice talent that was a part of the Batman the Animated Series, and one of the writers, Paul Dini, to help write and make this game a reality. Going through the history of Batman itself, they had to pick and choose what villains to add and what villains to hint at. But the thing is, this Batman story opens up the usual way. Batman catches the Joker from whatever scheme he was up to and has to take him back to the asylum. But as the story unfolds, there is a little bit of a mystery and intrigue that there's more going on. You do get hints for other villains, like ones that aren't in the game. But as the opening goes on, you have a slow build of some of these villains. Like Killer Croc, like Harley Quinn, and maybe more that you wouldn't see. With the atmosphere in the asylum, it's very dark, dilapidated, and very much an insane asylum. It basically puts you in this realm of a very claustrophobic horror environment. You're very limited. You don't get a gun. It's not Resident Evil where you can, shoot people. But you do have, gadgets, and you can be very strategic with your stealth or combat, which I will get into that in another segment in the video. With this character, it opens it up with the fact that you know this character. It builds on the fact that there is a history of this universe and it's gone on for a long time. Similar to how Marvel Spider-Man opens, that is what they play on. The idea of This character has a history. We know this. We don't have to retell it completely. And we kind of, they do hint at his origin many times in the series. And one of my favorite flashbacks or hallucination sequences is with Scarecrow, which each villain in the asylum is a different challenge to Batman in a different sense. Where Joker is a mixture of a psychological challenge where he puts all this at display, where he's very much the key adversary. He's the main he's the main boss of the game, where he is basically, playing and wearing Batman down. Harley is just his henchman. She is pretty much just Harley, and she's voiced by the talented Arlene Sorkin, R.I.P. to her, and Kevin Conroy, which brought these characters to life. And you have multiple um, other villains. While Scarecrow is a different type of psychological threat, you have Bane and Victor Zsasz, who makes an appearance, which is actually introduces a different type of rogues gallery to the forefront, where there are villains that aren't really costumes, they're just psychos. And it kind of plays on that with this game, where there's lore and there's different characters that you have to worry about. And it builds on the history with not just atmosphere, but just little things that you want to, if you want to research into and basically find these little Easter eggs. Now, getting into the nitty gritty of gameplay, yes, this game is decades old, so it was made in 2009, so I will not be saying that this is not a comparison of what game does things better. If not, this is not what this is. It's a mixture between review and analysis, but the combat is pretty much with the forefront of the creation of, basically, it's the Arkham combat formula. It is like, it's what some games took from after Arkham Asylum was made, which they expanded on heavily in Arkham City, which I will go on and do a comparison between that and Arkham, not Arkham, Spider-Man 2 in another video in the future. But with the story, it's your standard fare. But it does take time to focus sometimes on Batman's psyche in its a unique way. Here's the difference of how to do a superhero game. You show and not completely tell. You do not have to spoon feed your audience everything. You have them learn things slowly, build this, connection with things. Like, this world is going on for a while. There are characters like Oracle that are a part of the game helping you out. There are characters like Jim Gordon that are here, and other characters and different enemy types and stuff like that. Poison Ivy. You also can learn about these villains through dead drops and audio logs, I should say, and just reading their profiles and stuff like that. There are hints for other villains that you don't see in the game, but it gives you a taste of wanting more. And I think that is how Arkham Asylum does things. Now, the boss fights where you're fighting Bane, some boss fights can be kind of simple, avoid and stuff like that, which they heavily fix in a city. But when it comes down to it, the game is building up this slow, isolated feeling. That is what, how Arkham Asylum is its biggest strength, and that is what makes it so great. The isolation, how you're walking around the asylum and how creepy it is. It's like walking around a haunted house. You don't know what's going to happen, what's around any corner, and that's what makes it amazing. And with the gadgets and the limited things that you can do, now some things do show their age, but they show it in a good way. You don't have to make something overly colorful to make it amazing. And I think that's what Batman Arkham Asylum did that made it so great. Where it is a semi-open world game, there's not side missions or extra things. You do have collectibles that you can get, but they make sense for the world at that moment because you're stuck on the asylum. There's no way to get out. And I think that's what's amazing about it, is that you're very isolated and you can't get out. And there's moments where they kind of give you a juxtapose on things, make you question things as Batman subtly that you would not expect that if you really think about it. There are scenes, especially the Scarecrow hallucinations, especially the final one, where it flips that universe on its head, basically saying, you get told a lot of the time in as Batman on the asylum, basically you're insane. Like, what makes you any different than us? And I think the final hallucination basically juxtaposes that, where it basically flips the entire universe, while basically the owners of the madhouse, basically the villains, are practically what is seen as sane, while Batman and the good guys are seen as unsane, especially, Batman. And I think the juxtaposing of the character of Bruce, there's breakdowns of like just moments, especially with the Scarecrow segments, where like he is scared and he feels bad, like especially thinking that Jim Gordon died, which is the first segment that you have, or the second segment that focuses on that character of Bruce, how, like, why he is the way he is, especially his relationship with Jim, how the dialogue is very, soft as a kid. He's just like, why? Why did this happen? Why? You know, and it focuses on that relationship between him and Jim Gordon slightly and juxtaposes that, giving us a slight origin of it's the same origin as all the other Batman. He's just trying to make amends for the fact that he lost his parents, make Gotham better, be the avenging angel. And I think that's what makes it great. And that's what sets the bar for Batman Arkham Asylum. There's a lot of elements that are kind of dated, and there's a lot of elements that are, you know, kind of loose and kind of show their age. But not saying that that is a bad thing. Don't get me wrong, Batman Arkham Asylum is a little bit of an old game. But the thing is, you take out those elements, you're left with just a amazing game. Now, just opposing the boss fights, not everything can be great, but there is a lot of great elements, and there's a lot of awesome moments in the game. It is a game that I highly recommend because sometimes it does take those slow moments to build on Batman's psyche and show off what type of a broken character he is. Building the character up, not spoon feeding us information through dialogue completely, just telling us through actions or cutscenes, or not really spoon feeding us that information, but showing us in a unique way. And that is what's amazing, is sometimes in the game you have a bit of that, where it does take time to focus on how complex Batman is as a character, especially with how he fights and the gameplay of stealth and just his relationships with characters. How he is very cold and calculating, how he talks to even the guards and people. Like, the first encounter you have with the guard that's lucky to be alive, they ask if, he needs any help. He says, no, I work better alone. But that's not completely true. He actually does work with other people, and that's where Oracle comes in and, is his eyes and ears. And I think that's what is an interesting thing that is a part of the game that it's not at the forefront, but it's, when you think about it, is amazing. Now, just opposing that with Spider-Man, which is a more recenter game, and it came out in 2018. Now, Spider-Man is a different character to Batman in multiple sense. Batman is a rich billionaire who has a lot of wealth and a lot of resources. How am I going to compare Spider-Man to Batman? I'm not. Here's the thing with one thing I can compare is how both developers handle the idea of the character, the ideals, and also just focusing on the small moments with that character, building up things. Now, the difference between Marvel Spider-Man and Arkham Asylum differs on its story front, how it handles the villains. Where Batman Arkham Asylum focuses on the fact that you already know the villain. It's not like a slow build up. No, it's like the mystery is what's the villain's plan. Where the game differs on that front for Spider-Man is that Spider-Man focuses on building up these villains, building up like it already establishes, like Arkham Asylum, that there's a history there. This is a dated character, and this is its own universe where it takes the time to build that some stuff up and show, not tell, and spoon feed you that information. And I think that is another thing that's how you handle the character and build that up. The opening moments are the basically the how both games open is just opposed. How Spider-Man opens is simple. You have this slow build up and show like the history of this character, like his aunt, his Uncle Ben, his friends, Mary Jane, and basically Harry. Norman Osborn, who is Harry's father. There's like darts near his name, kind of showing that maybe Peter doesn't care for him too much. And then you go over to the Spider-Man mask, how it's like he's a tech genius. He knows kind of what he's doing, but he's kind of poor. So you see like rice boxes and he's unorganized. Then you go to like the villain wall and you show off these like pictures. Like he's fought a different bunch of villains. It's showing, not telling completely. And it's then you have like the opening moments, like he's finally getting one of his villains that he's been after for a while, and that's Wilson Fisk. Just opposing that with Arkham Asylum, how the whole point of that game is just like you take the Joker to Asylum, he breaks out. With this, it's basically building up that there's a history that he's after this villain because and it's built up along the way. Like there's moments, and they also show off these characters like Yuri Watanabe, like there's a hint of like Peter having like these moments, like his work calling him, and he's like a normal person. He has a job. He's a scientist, and there's like a build up in that moment where you kind of think, this is interesting. Like he's kind of like me, but as a superhero. Just imposing that with Batman, who's rich and stuff like that. Then as you go along, you fight, Fisk, and like you take him down. But in that moment, like, it kind of shows, him taking that villain, that leaves a gap there. And that's the catalyst of the story. And I think that's the difference on the story front, where while Spider-Man, it slowly builds up a different set of villains and kind of makes them kind of connected to Peter in a different sense, where these characters are, where it kind of focuses on the mashing of two worlds, like, how Spider-Man comics are presented. Well, that is the difference between that game and Batman, where Batman, it's up in the air. You know exactly what might happen, but you're also slow to pick up on the mystery of something. What is the plan here? You already know of all of Batman's rogues gallery. You know of everything that could happen. And I think that's what's interesting, where you find these little cells, and where the Riddler tasked you with, like, in a way, solving these riddles, and you get a hint for these other villains that Batman has fought, like Calendar Man, like Maxi Zeus and stuff. You don't see them, but you basically know that they exist. But with Spider-Man, the villains are built up, the newer villains. Like, the older villains come back, and they come back with a fury later in the game. But this act of, like, the catalyst of taking down Fisk, then that sets in motion these small little things, like the rise of Mr. Negative and the Inner Demons, like the just these small things. Like, Norman could be also just as much of a catalyst of things as Fisk, and I think that's where there's a buildup in a sense of Fisk and Norman are like two sides of a different coin, where both men are rich, both men have resources, but both men are different in a different sense. Fisk doesn't care who he hurts or how he hurts them. He just wants to control crime, and he is, like his name suggests, the kingpin. Where Norman, you actually slowly build up his reasoning for how and why he does the things he does. And it's a little different than how he's handled in the comics or TV shows. He is still a pretty much an a-hole, but how he's handled, what things go on, that's the difference. And I think it takes time to focus on maybe that Norman is just as much of a catalyst for these events as Spider-Man, but you really don't get a sense of that at first, but you start to replay the game and you think about it. After Spider-Man takes down Kingpin, you actually learn that Kingpin and Norman work together because Norman needed Kingpin's resources, and he already knew that Kingpin was an a-hole. Like, he's basically the Kingpin of crime. He's like, it has his fingers in all the pies. And I believe that is something that you think, you actually, after playing it, you think, wait a minute. If Norman knew that, then he also knew that Fisk was a bad guy. So he was relying on that to cover up, like, Devil's Breath, which is designed to heal but can't because it's flawed. And that is something that's interesting, where you learn about Norman's, family life, and you learn about how he screwed over multiple people, basically, was the catalyst for Mr. Negative, was the catalyst for how Doc Ock turned into the villain of the game. Like, Doc Ock being the mentor to Peter, like a father figure, is different between how Batman and Joker are. Batman and Joker, it's like an effed up love story from the Joker's point of view. While Doc Ock, it's like a father figure becoming like an alcoholic. He's slowly losing himself. And then you can't save him near the end. And I think that's what's interesting, is it takes time to build up this dynamic between him and Peter, where you feel bad for him in these other moments where he's like, he asked you, like, if you want to leave, you go right ahead. It's but he's like, no, I'm not going anywhere. And I think that's what's interesting. Like, even Martin Lee's relationship with May, he actually is more inspired by her to be a better man comparatively, but he can't let go of the wrath against Norman, similar to Otto. And I think that's where Mr. Negative and Otto mirror each other as villains, where they are symbols of wrath. And while one is a duality, which this game focuses on heavily compared to, Arkham Asylum, that really doesn't focus on that, this game takes time to build up villains, to show the dynamic nature of things. Now, are we going to sit there and say that, this game is better than Arkham Asylum? None are better. They have two handlings of how to do things. The open world of New York it's an open world game. While Arkham Asylum is semi-open world, Spider-Man is pretty much open world. You have these small tasks. You build up these other characters like Black Cat, or with the backpacks with Easter eggs. The thing is, they're both mirrors of how to handle a superhero game, but in two different facets. While this game takes time to build a connection with this villain and slowly build it up and say, that moment where it slowly they turn against you, they become, you know, basically the villain of things. They cannot be, not that they cannot be stopped, but they cannot be completely redeemed. And that is the case with Otto. You learn about the motivations. You slowly build a connection with them where you don't want them to be the bad guy. But by then, it's already too late, and that's where the games differ. There's so many other things I could talk about, but this video will probably drag on for too long. But I hopefully you guys enjoy. There's so many things that make these games mirrors of one another, and how to open your basically a superhero game, how to show and not completely tell everything, to build on history and basically know that character. And I think that is the one of the best elements of the game, to show and not completely tell, and build on this history and the connections and make you feel something. Both games do this, but in different ways.